After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and d4, the Scotch is happening. So pawn takes, and now we're looking at the Max Lange type of game, right? Bishop c4 now. So white doesn't recapture the pawn, but rather go for quick development, exploiting the fact that we didn't develop these two pieces for a quick maybe attack, on g5, especially removing d4, playing d4 straight away allows the bishop to protect the square g5, giving the knight the square g5, allowing an attack on f7. We all know the motives of this opening. So here, as mentioned, we have to play bishop c5. We made a video about the Max Lange already. Here we have to go through some other very important lines. One of them being the main topic of the video, c3, which is basically another pawn gambited. This is actually a gambit, but white gets a great development. Before that, let's quickly mention how to deal with these annoying moves that I've encountered. e5 right now. I've met this move a lot of time, and it always gave me some trouble before I decided to study what to do against this. So now I'm making this video, and I haven't mentioned it yet at all in my channel, so let's go through it. e5y, to deprive the knight from the possibility to develop to the square f6, because if we develop the knight in f6, then we can castle, we're out of trouble. So now we play knight g to e7, we develop like that, and we are going to castle. That's it. Our opponent simply down a pawn because we are defending it twice, and it's attacked twice, so that's it. There's no compensation whatsoever. Now you might argue, what if... Okay, first of all, the bishop in f7 doesn't... bishop f7 sacrifice doesn't do anything. It's just wrong. There's just nothing. It's completely wrong. More information available if you watch the other videos. Anyway, knight to g5 now. The best way to neutralize this, also because if you were to castle now, your opponent plays queen h5, puts a lot of attack over f7, and it's kind of annoying to me. It's actually a bit of a problem, to be honest. The best move is knight takes in e5 with an attack on this bishop, neutralizing everything. And okay, well, getting the bishop away from them will give just an easy win for black. I mean, there's no compensation here. If instead white carries on the attack, queen h5, going for a checkmate here, stopping us from castling, because then there will be a mate in h7. Simply d5 is the best move. The knight defends e5, got nothing to worry. And if white, okay, here white is just giving up material even more. If f4, with the idea of removing the knight so to have an attack on f7, play the most aggressive variation. We can't really play knight takes bishop, because then the queen has access to f7, and it's a terrible position to continue the game from. Here you just play bishop to g4, removing the queen from this diagonal, and that's gonna be it. Queen moves, still keeping an eye on the bishop. Okay, well, knight f5, the queen really has to go away now. So let's go from the start. e4, e5, and the Scotch game with the gambit. Okay, bishop c5, bishop c4. Okay, bishop c5. Another mention very quickly. If white instead doesn't play c3, which is the main move we're looking at, and white just castles now, this move is slow enough to allow you to just play d6. The idea is to play bishop g4, and if white were to play a slow move like h3, then remember that we are controlling the square d4, and there's no compensation for white. In that case, we're just going to carry on. d6 is important to stop e5, which allows us to play knight f6 without worrying about anything. Let's make an example. c3 now. You can say, okay, white is still in time to make that attack, especially if we were to take now the pawn and get too greedy and take the pawn in c3. White will have some sort of good development, so we're just going to play bishop g4. And now the knight isn't really defending this pawn, so if pawn takes, then we can just take back, and the knight is pinned, so it's going to be much better. I mean, black is just much better. Let's look at this move, queen to b3. It's a typical move to put more attack over the square f7 and also over b7. Looks like a really good move. He also unpins the knight. We take here. Strangely enough, we don't care about bishop takes in f7, because now you move the king f8. And that's it. We're going to save the bishop unless our opponent finally takes us back. But when that happens, you play d3, avoiding the swap, stopping the development of this knight in c3, which is the ideal square in this type of game. So after development, bishop e3, trying to maybe reunite the pawn structure, or maybe take us and double up our pawn. Black plays knight e5, attacking this bishop. and also threatening f3. So the best move by white is to take the bishop. We take back, and we're actually okay. The pawn structure is fine. Let's leave it like that. The bishop's got nowhere to go without allowing us to trade. But we're going to a winning endgame, especially with threatening knight f3. So after knight to h5, bishop to h5 to stop that, queen to g5 means that we were inevitably going to either take this pawn, win this pawn with a great position, or play queen to g5. Bishop blocks, but now h5 should do. Okay, queen to b7 with a counterattack on this rook looks really dangerous, but we don't care because pawn takes bishop. And after losing this rook, king to e7. And nothing stops us from infiltrating now and winning this game completely. We either take the pawn, if white doesn't want to trade pawns and push the pawn. Again, we have these two attackers on this square. We also have knight f3 idea with the rook going, so that's going to be checkmate soon enough. And this now leads us to, finally, the c3 move. Okay, d4, take. Bishop c4, bishop c5, c3. Okay, here's the gambit. And probably one of the most annoying moves that I've ever had to encounter, because I'm an e5 player, and proudly so. Knight f6 comes now. Yes, we don't care about e5, we don't care about anything. So let's look at this couple of options. It's more than a couple, but anyway, e5 with an attack on the knight. Let's not get too passive. This is exactly what white wants. He's giving us stuff. He gave us a pawn for development. So let's not remain undeveloped. d5 is the right move. Counterattack. He takes us, I take you. Okay, bishop b5 is the main move. Before we look at that, let's see what happens if, for real, white takes the knight. Okay. Take the bishop. And after pawn takes in g7 with an attack on the rook, we can't castle anymore, but now rook to g8. And that's it. Especially if we get to play a move like d3, we're doing absolutely amazingly. Two moves we're going to look at. One of them is the check of the queen. The other one is the bishop supporting the pawn. Bishop supporting the pawn actually is not worth looking, because straight away you neutralize this move. Queen to f6 takes the bishop. Well, obviously the bishop will move away, but whenever that happens, then rook g7, you got rook on an open file. This is the only side of the game where it makes sense to castle for the white player. The checks of the queen are completely harmless because of bishop e6. You can castle long, you're completely winning. The bishop here just lost the tempo, will have to move away. So that's really a bad move. If queen e2 instead, check. Okay, bishop e6, block and develop. A move like castle now, you just play d3. And this is a fantastic position for black to play. We got the bishop pair. This is a pass pawn connected to this one. We've got a massive majority on this side. We can play b5 as well. The game plays itself. So let's go back, and instead of castling here now, let's play another move that looks like it makes sense. Pawn takes in d4. Okay, knight takes back, and it's attacking the queen. And when the queen moves, you can take the knight. It's a obviously winning position. So let's assume the our opponent will be sensible and take. Okay, queen takes back. And now nothing stops us from recapturing g7. First, you want to castle long, probably. Let's see, bishop e3 attacking the queen. We can't really go to b2 because of the opponent queen. Check. And our opponent will now block with the queen. Then we're going to take the opponent queen with the bishop and win the game. Now I'm kidding. Our opponent can either block with the bishop or with the knight. With the knight in c3 is not possible because we have two attackers, so we're going to win material. So knight to d2. Oh well, let's mention straight away bishop to d2. Then you can just play queen b2 because now the rook is trapped for real. So that's not possible. However, after the bishop b4 check, knight to d2 block, you're still going to play rook b2. Although this looks like it makes more sense because knight d2 is developing a piece. It's allowing the rook to move away and not get trapped. Castle looks nice. Our opponent's planning to play rook b1. Looks like white is well developed. Castle long. You fear nothing. Rook a b1. Rook queen to g7. Threatening mate, meaning that white can't just take the bishop in b4. And that's it. Completely winning endgame on every aspect. Which takes us to the beginning. And here we're gonna look at something we haven't seen. So bishop c5, c3, okay, knight f6 developing. And we're looking at the very early e5 move. We play d5. What happens if our opponent plays bishop to b5? This is the main move. Okay, now we have to save the knight, so knight e4. And now white castles. What happens if white finally recaptures the pawn in d4, especially because the bishop in b5 is pinning the knight? Okay, not a problem. Pawn takes, bishop to b6. And after knight to d2, challenging our strong knight, castle. And we're completely safe here. You don't have to worry about the pawn in e4 because it actually becomes strong. Like, it's not a weak pawn. For example, knight takes here in e4, pawn takes back. This type of move looks like the type of pawn that you are going to lose because it's so close to the opponent and it can be attacked. You know, queen c2, knight d2, castle, and then rook to e1. Everybody will be attacking this pawn, and this pawn in e4 usually can never be defended with the pawn in f5 because white can take en passant because the white player usually plays bishop c4, stopping it from happening. However, it's actually just fine. Now, let's say, for example, knight to g5 to attack it. You just take the pawn in d4. It's now free to be taken. Comes with an attack on the bishop, and there's absolutely no compensation. So what if instead our opponent decides to, in this position, instead of moving knight to g5, what if he decides to take the knight first? Take back. And after knight g5, bishop to a6 stops our opponent from castling. We give up the pawn, doesn't matter. But that's fine because after knight e4 now takes in d4. With an attack on e5. So after the best move, queen a4, threatening here, putting pressure there, threatening here. Bishop d3 is the best move. And you don't have to worry about the pawn in c6 being taken by the opponent queen because of queen to h4. And now we're putting double attack on this bishop, means that now we are threatening to take this bishop. Or, well, our opponent can't just attack us because then we can take with the queen. Pawn f3 to defend the knight is not possible because it's pinned. There is absolutely nothing. Unless our opponent plays knight g3. But let's look at it. Let's look at it in this line. How do you respond to the square knight to g3, to the move knight to g3? Well, this queen is pinned. So if white had played that before, then you will have bishop f2 check, you winning the opponent queen. In this position, the white player doesn't take the pawn in c6 because he identifies how bad it is to do so and rather plays knight g3 straight away. Okay, queen to d5 comes now, protecting the pawn in c6, attacking the pawn in g2. Okay, bishop f4. Developing. Also because the opponent cannot really castle this side, he might try some really crazy castling on this side, but it's just too crazy to even look at. Rook a to b8, putting more pressure on b2. It's such a torture. Rook to d1. Okay, let's try this. Putting pressure on this bishop in d3, we ignore it because after rook to b2, it's just too late to do anything. Rook takes here, but then bishop f3, bishop f2 check. And after taking the rook, that will happen with check, and that's gonna be it. Oh, and by the way, one more thing I forgot to mention in this position. After pawn takes back in e4, this pawn, as we said, is no weak. We went through knight g5 immediately, we went through bishop takes. What happens if white plays this type of move? Bishop to g5. Here, simply queen to d5, and that's it. You're attacking this bishop. If the bishop takes you, for example, then you just take back with the pawn. You have a very similar scenario to before. Take back with the pawn also because you want to continue the pressure on d4 and play bishop to g4, pinning that knight, and then play rook to d8. Well, obviously, first you're going to have to kick the bishop away. Well, it depends on how the game goes. Okay, so let's take it from the start just to learn it better. And I'm going to show one more line of the same variation. But as you have to take, and then here, c3, we said knight f6, e5, d5. We're looking now at the variation where the bishop does the pin, but now knight e4, right? And we saw what happens after pawn finally recaptures in d4. What happens if white immediately castles? And that looks like, you know, you notice how the opponent king was in trouble for so long. Now here white just castles and says, you know what, take my pawn in c3 because then I develop and then I get to continue this game. I'm down a pawn, but I have some nice development. Okay, well, we accept it because we are one step away from castling, so that's not enough. Knight c3, okay, knight c3, take. That's it, castle. We're out of any possible trouble. Our opponent has a pawn structure that is messed up, and we're up a pawn. Bishop to g5 was met with bishop to e7. We didn't really have anywhere good to go with the queen, to be honest. Because if you think about it here, if you play queen e8, then the queen can take in d5, but also if you play queen d7, this knight is still pinned. Our opponent might have some ideas like e6 and then maybe knight e5, and it's kind of very, very bad to me. I don't like it. So bishop e7 is the best move according to the engine. Obviously, we have double attack on that. Our opponent cannot play the thematic type of move h4 because we can just easily swap, and it's not like h4 will do anything because there's no rook on the h file. The rook is here in f1 because white castled, so this type of move doesn't do anything. You can just swap. So here after bishop takes, knight takes back is the best way to take back, and we will solidify the center very soon. h3 stops bishop g4. Okay, c5. Queen e2 developing, queen a5, attacking the weak pawn. And now a move like c4 to try and undermine the black center doesn't work because you will play a6. The bishop is trapped. So instead of c4, what if a move like rook a to c1, protecting that pawn? Now we play c4. And the bishop is still trapped. What are you going to do to save the bishop? a4 cannot happen. He will play a6. Queen to c2 to defend the bishop, but then a6. The bishop goes back and now b5. The bishop is still trapped. But anyway, enough with this line and let's move on. I mean, enough with that variation. I don't even know the difference between line and variation. Anyway, bishop c5, c3, knight f6. So we've been going through e5 and many of the things that happen next. Let's look at some other very popular moves. b4 is one of them. This forces us to play bishop to b6. And now a few options. e5 attacking the knight. Okay, knight to e4. Double attack on c3. Castle. White is developing like crazy. Okay, we need to play d5, thematic move. Let's look at this. Pawn taking en passant. How to take back? We don't, because we're underdeveloped, so we gotta develop. Castle. Rook to e1 attacking the knight. Bishop to f5 defending it. That's it, no compensation. Pawn takes d4. Queen takes back. We got triple attack over d4, so after bishop to e3, we're still gonna close the line now because as you notice, b4 kind of is a loose pawn, so b4 is there to be taken. Queen to b4. Black is just better. There's no compensation here. So in this position, by the way, in the same variation, the one with b4, we just went back with the bishop to b6, and then we went through e5. We kind of looked at how to meet that move. What if white plays a4, which is the usual move to play a5? The idea of trapping the bishop. Okay, a6, allowing a shelter for the bishop. a5, bishop a7. That's it. Bishop to g5 now, pinning the knight. h6, attacking straight away. Let's not assume that our opponent will give the bishop pair to allow us to develop more in the game where he himself gambited stuff. So that would be really stupid. If that happens, good on us. Bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, and now knight e4. This pawn is always safe to take. It looks like it can get pinned, but you're just okay. I mean, you can defend it with d5, queen e7. They're all good moves to play. Okay, castle, d5. Bishop b3, staying on the good diagonal. Bishop f5. Rook e1, pinning the knight. Castle. Position evaluated -3. We're up 2 pawns, but it's also the position is also much better. Oh, one more thing for this variation I forgot to mention is the capturing d4. So after b4, the black red moved the bishop back from c5 to b6. So we looked at moves like e5, we looked at moves like a4 with the idea of trapping the bishop. We didn't look at the simple recapture of the pawn in d4. Okay, so if the pawn is taken with the pawn here, you take the pawn here in e4 with the knight, and after castle and d5, you see, start to recognize the patterns. You will know that the best way to master the understanding of your defense or opening that you're playing depends on the pattern recognition, not by moves memorization. If you were to ask me how many lines I know by heart, the answer would be something around 500 to 600. Now I'm completely messing with you. Thing is, I try to remember the patterns, and then the patterns make me remember moves and lines. So here, remember, it's one of the many principles here is the knight takes e4 with the pawn d5 is 99% of the time just a good thing. So let's move on. Bishop to b3 now, for example. Knight to b4. There's no compensation whatsoever. Knight takes b4 here. There's no compensation whatsoever. If instead bishop to b5 instead of bishop b3, pinning the knight, castle, and now a3, looks like we can't take that pawn. Bishop to g4. Okay, bishop takes, pawn takes. The knight was no longer pinned, and the bishop had to take it because we had this double attack here in d4, exploiting the f3 pin. Knight b d2, defending that. Okay, we take this. And after rook to b1, knight to c3, meaning that that was going to be it. The game has been compromised, and black is winning it. And in this position, the last thing I'm going to say, earlier we went through pawn takes back in d4 instead of a4. What if knight takes? Okay, nothing changes, right? You just take in e4. We haven't seen this idea, which is basically queen to e2 now. How to respond to this castle. And the queen can't take here because of rook e8 winning the game. Position evaluated around -3, -350 or something. If white now castles and now is starting to take here, then simply knight takes in d4. Now taking the knight here allows us to play the bishop to d4 and attack the rook. If queen instead takes in e4, we play d5. This is a fork. We're attacking the queen, so the white player will have to take. You wonder what kind of fork is this, considering that there's two attackers over the square d5. But if the bishop takes, then bishop to f5 removes the queen from that square where she's defending the bishop. Then we can take a free bishop. If the queen stays close to the bishop, let's say queen e5, rook e8 should do the job. So let's go from the start. d4, we take bishop c4, bishop c5, c3. Okay, knight f6. What happens with the immediate pawn takes in d4? One of the most reasonable looking lines. Okay, bishop check. And now this has to be blocked. You also want to put an attack on, you are attacking the square e4. What happens if bishop blocks? Okay, you take in e4. Castle. Knight takes. Knight takes. Oh, before we look at this, after taking back, the point of this line was like, gambiting everything, and the reason is for development, right? So after knight takes the bishop, what if instead of recapturing, white plays rook to e1? Looks like a really good move. Okay, king to f8 is the best move. There is no very active way to block this without going down in initiative. So now white can recapture, but now d5, bishop b3, these are all forced moves. g6, fianchettoing the king, but at least allowing king g7. Our opponent doesn't have the dark square bishop, you got nothing to worry, then you can develop the rook, artificially castling. Knight e5 just doesn't do anything, simply it looks like it does, allowing queen f3 maybe. Not that it really does anything, it's just an idea, but here in this case, by the way, this is a free pawn. Don't be scared to take it, this is the best move according to the engine. So that's it, that line doesn't work. So let's go back here, straight after taking the bishop. Knight takes back instead of rook e1. This doesn't change much. Now, except the fact that this is even better because now we're going to castle. d5. Let's look at this idea. Attacking the knight will have to move. And we don't get the chance to play d5 ourselves. Now, we don't have any pawn in the center. Knight to b8, that's fine. Knight to e4, developing. I used to be so scared of this when I was playing against it without knowledge. We only up a pawn. But this is just better. Our opponent is completely developed. We only have one bishop developed. But that pawn advantage is actually solid. There are no weaknesses. Black now plays d6. Okay, queen a4 attacking the bishop. Bishop c5. Crazy enough, we're giving up the bishop pair. There was no better moves than that. Knight takes, pawn takes. Rook f2 e1. Knight to d7. Rook a to d1. Knight to b6, attacking the two of them. Queen b3, queen b6. I mean d6. That's it. This is white having played the absolute top engine moves in a faulty variation. And the faulty variation will be the Max Lange itself. But now you might wonder, oh, endgame strategies, what about the faulty variations that you play? What about when you play the Vienna Gambit? Or if I'm playing a blitz with a friend and I play the King's Gambit? I don't. I always play the Vienna Gambit. Or what about when I play the Rousseau Gambit or the Schliemann Gambit? Well, yeah, I'm going to be making videos on what to do against them. But what I'm saying is, just because a variation is faulty, it doesn't mean it's bad. You're going to have to know exactly how to beat it. Because if you don't, players of every level have lost to the Max Lange, the Scotch Gambit, or whatever this is called. I've lost to it countless times. So you have to know it very well. Okay, knight to g5 now. Let's look at some more moves and then we're going to close this line forever. Bishop to f5, developing. Knight to e4 comes now with a strong attack on these two. Looks like in a really good move. So that's why bishop e5 was a strong move we had to take. Rook e4. Simplifying will let us win now. We play rook a to e8. Okay, rook e1. Take, take. Take, take. And now b6, solidifying the pawn chain. We got a majority, and this pass pawn is not going anywhere. Sorry, it's not really a pass pawn, it's a stupid pawn. h4 now. h5. These are the best engine moves. This is how crazy it is when you make your opponent play a certain variation with engine moves, and they go all the way until the end and still cannot win. a4, but now black just plays rook to d8. And we're winning this pawn no matter what. So if instead of a4, our opponent plays rook to e2 first. Rook to d8. Okay, rook to d2. c6. You see, it was going to happen no matter what. Queen to a6. Best move. Attacking the weak pawn. Take here. Queen takes, but now d4. And you're going to have to take it from here. Okay, so let's do this now. Something else that has to be done. Bishop c5, c3, knight f6. And now, instead of, okay, we went through early e5, early b4, early pawn takes. What happens if white castles? Okay, crazy enough, this really is the best move, and I guess the takeaway of the day. Rook e1, and yeah, we're ignoring development, but we're up 2 pawns now, and d5 literally saves everything. Two options here. Bishop removing itself from that square, obviously. Bishop b5. We take here. And that's it. We damage the pawn structure, depriving the knight the possibility to go to the only natural square. If instead, let's say, knight c3. Okay, well, bishop f2, right? You get that. You totally didn't see that, did you? Okay, so in this position, instead of bishop moving back to b5, allowing us to take in c3 with the discovered threat on f2. What if white takes here in d4 with an attack on this bishop? Well, okay, bishop b4. Attacking the rook. So the move rook e2 is a bit silly, but you gotta know what to do. Okay, finally castles. a3 attacking the bishop, bishop a5, b4, bishop b6. No problem. Knight to d2. Trading with our fantastic knight doesn't work because of knight c3. So that's kind of a problem. Our knight is just too strong. And it's funny because a move like bishop f5 is always good to play, because knight h4 attacking the bishop is never possible, since we will be taking the knight with the queen. So that's the good thing about having the knight from f6 to e4. And in this position, after bishop to b4, let's look at two options. I mean, one option, starting from bishop to g5, attacking the queen. It's a very annoying move, but here just play queen d6. This is the best way to respond. Let's look at two options now. Knight to d2 now. Trying to trade with our fantastic knight, you play f5. This is the best thing. Obviously, you play f5. You can't play bishop f5 now, because knight h4 attacking the bishop is a real threat, because you're no longer attacking that knight. So f5. Okay. Bishop to b3 finally, removing itself from the attack of the queen, of the pawn in d5. Bishop e6. Rook to c1. h6 attacking the bishop. Bishop going back, because obviously going back means that we're going to trap it with g5 f4. Long castle. Oh, by the way, g3 here, in order to stop us from playing f4, doesn't work because of g5. We're going to play f4 no matter what and open the file in front of the opponent king. If instead white plays bishop a4 instead of g3, then f4 can come right away. Bishop takes. Okay, ignore it, because it's the bishop will have to go. So you take here, and there's a vision, so you're attacking the knight. So the bishop moves, you're attacking another piece. You're also attacking f2 with a threat on the rook. So in this position, in the variation with bishop g5 attacking the queen, queen d6, earlier we went through knight to d2 developing. What if white simply takes the bishop back to b3? Okay, well, we take this rook. There's no compensation. There's no, like, it's not like a real sacrifice or anything. Queen takes, and now castle. White is well developed, but it doesn't matter. Knight to c3. Knight takes here. Knight takes back. There is nothing. h6. Knight goes back. Bishop to g4. Further in the attack and trying to break the pawn structure. Okay, knight e5. Rook a to e8. We're up a pawn, and our opponent's pawn is also doubled up. I mean, isolated. The knight can't take the bishop because it's pinned. Bishop to d5 looks like it can really happen, but now you can just take the knight in e5. Pawn takes back. Rook takes with an attack on the queen and a double attack on this bishop. Queen to d2, defending the bishop a little bit more. Bishop e6, attacking it further. Rook to d1, c6, completing the masterpiece. Oh, the last mention before I close this video, and I'm gonna close this video after this mention, which is here after this moves, right? Bishop c5, c3, knight f6. What if white immediately plays bishop to g5? This is known as the I hate you variation, because every time I used to play this move, I never knew what to do. Okay, here's the thing. Just remember this. This is the last mention of the video. Just remember this. h6, that's it. If they play e5, you're attacking this bishop. If they go back, g5, and that's it. You don't have to worry, because if you can't leave the bishop there in g5, because then e5 becomes a thing, and you don't want to play d6 because it's a slow move after pawn takes here at the center. You're actually, this is actually not the best way to continue. You want to be able to play d5. So h6, bishop goes back, and now you go g5, bishop goes back, and now knight e4. And it's a transposition into something we've seen already. So this is it for today. Make sure you continue to support the channel with your likes, your comments. Thank you so much for feeding my ego anytime you say that I'm amazing. And I honestly don't know why so many of you in the comments call me sir. Like, what the hell makes you think I'm like a sir or something? I'm a god, first of all. And secondly, make sure you spread this video with your friends. It really helps my channel grow, and I'll see you next time.